Ukraine sank a Russian ship and downed 4 Russian Su-34s in the last week alone. Ukrainian General Zaluzhny talks about what he underestimated in relation to the Russian military. And I'm going to go on a rant about just how bad the mainstream media coverage of this war has been, really from the start. Skip it, watch it, either way, it's going to happen. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Starting with battlefield updates, there's not been a lot of movement along the front lines over the last few days, but Ukraine did carry out a pretty significant attack in Crimea. Just a few days ago, they struck the Novichokhovsk, a large Russian landing ship in Crimea. They are suspected of having used either Storm Shadows or Scalp EG missiles fired from Ukrainian Su-24s. The Russian Defense Ministry did acknowledge this to a degree. They said Ukraine had used air-launched missiles to attack the Crimean port and that the Novichokhovsk had been damaged. The videos and pictures coming out of this, it's one of those where Russia says damaged. It looks like that whole thing is just completely destroyed, entirely sunk. The videos that came out, you can see the initial explosion, which would be bad and could very well sink a ship by itself. But the secondary detonation on board was catastrophic. I mean, it doesn't look like the ship was empty. It was potentially, I've seen some rumors that it was carrying munitions that could be shuttled somewhere along the front. Either way, massive explosion. And from the pictures coming out, it looks like the Novichokhovsk is done, like unrecoverable. And on that note, the UK Defense Secretary Shops recently said that 20% of the Russian Black Sea Fleet has been destroyed just in the past 4 months. Additionally, Ukraine put out that they've shot down 4 Russian Su-34s in the past week over 2 separate attacks. They say 3 were shot down over Kherson, and then a few days later, 1 was shot down near Mariupol. So both of these are over Russian-occupied territory. Now, neither of these have been confirmed by Russia, but you wouldn't expect them to be. Just historically, neither side comes out and volunteers, yeah, we lost an aircraft, it was shot down at this location. These shoot downs are notable in that they came 1 week after Germany announced that they had sent their second Patriot system to Ukraine. So now there's, I think, 4 Patriot systems across all of Ukraine at this point. Now, this is total speculation. You'll probably see some of this floating around the internet anyways, but there's rumors that a Patriot system was moved close enough to the front to be able to range Russian aircraft in areas that they thought they were out of range of any Ukrainian air defense asset. We saw something similar to this a few months ago, kind of northeast of Ukraine, again inside of Russian territory, where I think it was 3 helicopters fell out of the sky out of nowhere. There were a lot of rumors where they man pads that, a small team that used man pads to down these inside of Russian territory when they weren't expecting any sort of enemy fire. Was it friendly fire? Also a rumor that's circulating right now that this could have been Russia shooting down their own jets. Either way, that idea that a Patriot was pushed forward, quickly shot down some Su-34s and got out of there is on the table, we'll say. Then on December 25th, Russian Defense Minister Shoigu told President Putin, quote, "The assault detachment of the South grouping completely liberated the settlement of Marinka today." I want to play some footage of what Marinka looks like right now. I mean, it's ruins. There's nothing there at all. The town is completely razed to the ground. Ukraine denied this statement from Russia, saying, quote, "The city is completely destroyed, but it is incorrect to talk about the complete capture of Marinka." What are we talking about here, right? Like the official boundary, like on the outskirts of town or something? I don't know. I wanted to show the footage because I think the term liberation, I wonder if the citizens of Marinka would use that term to describe what their town looks like today. Then a few days ago, the New York Times published an article saying that Putin is ready to consider a ceasefire in Ukraine. And I think the article's wrong in a lot of ways. And I'm going to get into that, but I'm going to use this as an example to just say I think the mainstream news coverage of this war has been awful. From the day the invasion kicked off in 2022 until now, it's been awful across the board. I mean, you can find some examples in there that are good. Thank goodness we've got things like YouTube, podcasts, Twitter, and Telegram to actually kind of sift through the weeds and have a better understanding of what's happening there. But these major outlets, we have to talk about what they put out because so many people see it. This one article was thrown up on Twitter, like 200,000 people saw it. And the New York Times has like 10 million subscribers. Right? So many people read this and thought, oh, look, Putin's ready to surrender. He's not. We'll get back to that. But this is something where you should be upset about this coverage, no matter where you fall on this spectrum. I'm upset from multiple different directions. Look, there has never been a realistic picture painted to the public from these outlets. You've got to go to alternative sources. You've got to go, not off the grid, but find people you trust and read between the lines and look up different analysts all across the board. These main outlets, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, Fox News, across the board, they have not been forthcoming in what the situation is on the ground. And it's coming home to roost now. So if you fully support Ukraine and want to see the United States do everything in our power to help Ukraine repel the Russian invaders, you should be upset, because it was over a year ago we heard through these outlets that Russia was running out of missiles. They're not out of missiles. They're not running low on missiles. They're not running out of drones. We heard that Putin was dead, sick, dying, any one of those above, that the country was collapsing in on itself, right? This is going to be over any day now. And that's one of the impediments right now to passing more Ukraine aid, is a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, I thought this thing was about to be over. I thought Russia was about to collapse. How long are we signing on for? Because it kind of looks like, as more news comes out, that Russia is not running out of ammunition. They are not running out of people. And Putin seems pretty committed to seeing this thing through to the end. And conversely, on the other end of the spectrum, if you feel like the United States should not have been involved at all here, you should be angry with how this is being covered, because it's always been a slow creep. Just a little bit more and a little bit more. Victory is around the corner. And now we kind of have an indefinite war in Ukraine. It doesn't look like, when you look at where the two sides are lining up right now, this thing is far from over. And to get somebody to say that, and to have somebody say this war is going to be a long war, it's going to drag on for years, and there's no end in sight, you could not go to some of these major outlets that have tens of millions of people tuning in every day. I think that's a problem. I think it was incredibly misleading, and I don't know that it helped anyone, really, at all. Who is that benefiting? Right? It's just not presenting accurate information, and then we're making decisions or forming opinions based off of inaccurate information. What are we doing? What's this for? Right? I mean, at the very beginning of the war, there's a short period of time where I can understand the sentiment of you want to be, positive for Ukraine. If you support Ukraine, you want to be positive for them. If you're in a fist fight with somebody, you don't want your buddy standing off to the side saying you're going to get your ass beat. You want your friend saying, you got this. You got this. I'm here for you. So I get it. But at some point, you got to step back and provide an objective analysis and say, hey, this is realistically what could happen going forward. This is what's not in the cards. And I just feel like when you look, you could find that analysis. It's out there. But it wasn't coming across on any of the major outlets that are reaching the vast majority of the American public. And I think, in turn, the majority of our country was probably making decisions and had opinions based on this war that were not grounded in reality. That's frustrating. All right, rant complete. I'm done, I promise. Getting into this article here that I think, again, is misleading, but we're going to talk about it because a lot of people are going to see this, and you're going to see headlines about this going forward. So according to some of these unnamed officials that are close to Putin or Russian allies, it's not clear. They say Putin says he won't give up what's ours, but if they want to negotiate, let them negotiate. NATO, the U.S., Ukraine, and so on. They say Mr. Putin has been signaling through intermediaries since at least September that he is open to a ceasefire that freezes the fighting along the current lines, far short of his ambitions to dominate Ukraine. They say, quote, he really is willing to stop at the current positions, says one former senior Russian official who told the New York Times, saying that Putin is, quote, not willing to retreat 1 meter, end quote. I think it's easy for people to see this, and their takeaway is Russia's ready to give up. They're calling it quits. They've had enough. I don't think that's the message here at all. So first off, these are unnamed officials, back-channel sources. This is a long ways away from actual ceasefire negotiations happening, right? So keep that in mind. The second part, if you look at the strategic picture right now, the operational picture on the ground, Russia has the advantage. So if they want to set up some sort of negotiation right now, it's because they feel like they have the upper hand. And I think they do in a lot of ways. So it's not crazy for Putin. Nobody wants to just keep losing soldiers left and right, losing aircraft, losing ships like Russia has in the last few days. If Putin can get a frozen conflict to a degree, and then just kick it back up whenever he wants to down the road, that's in his favor. Who knows what these ceasefire terms would be, right? We can't just view the ceasefire as Russia is going to leave Ukraine. In fact, that's what they say. They're not willing to retreat 1 meter. So somehow this is kind of being presented as Russia's on the last rope. They're ready to give up. I think it's the exact opposite. I think Russia looks at Ukraine having just culminated their much anticipated counteroffensive with all of this new Western equipment, the newly trained Western brigades. Now Russia's back on the offensive in Avdiivka, Bakhmut, Marinka, and other areas. The tide has shifted. The aid package for Ukraine hasn't passed through U.S. Congress. They're going to run out of aid on December 30th. I think Putin's signal for a ceasefire here is not being kind to Ukraine. It's him recognizing they have the upper hand. He's going to try to get as much as he can at the negotiating table, and if it doesn't work, right back to the battlefield. Anyways, that one, 10 million subscribers, that's going to go out there to the entire New York Times consumer base, and I think it's probably just a little bit misleading. Then shifting over to the Ukrainian side, the Chief of Staff, General Zaluzhny, gave a press conference the other day with some interesting tidbits that I thought were worth running through. Talking about mobilization, if you remember, there was a rumor a couple days ago that Ukraine was considering the mobilization of 500,000 additional personnel into their military in the coming months. Zaluzhny said, quote, "Together with the Ministry of Defense, we agreed on a figure of 36 months, hoping for two conditions. First, that there will be no escalation at the front. Second, these people will be replaced in 36 months. Part of what he's getting at there is there's been a lot of pushback in Ukraine about people who join the military and they're just there indefinitely. They're not coming back, and they've been fighting now for 2 years, and their family members and the soldiers themselves are starting to wonder, like, how long is this going to go on for? And to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, that this war could still go on for years and years. So are those people fighting at the front going to be in those trenches for 2 years at a time, 3 years at a time? That's unsustainable for any military. So what Zaluzhny is getting at here is talking about a replacement period of 36 months. Of course, if that happens, they need to bring in a lot more people to fill those ranks, which he says, quote, "The government should understand if we are talking about demobilization, pulling those people out of uniform that have already fought for 2 or 3 years, then most likely it will be necessary to start this process in the recruitment of people in preparation early next year to be able to demobilize the current soldiers in 2025. So it's a good thing. Ukraine has this challenge. Any country that is currently being invaded has this challenge. They have to focus on the here and now. And it's hard at times to look out to the future because you face a very immediate, real threat in your face. So it does look like Ukraine is starting to look out a little further, planning their mobilizations, their demobilizations in the coming years, not just in the next 30, 60, 90 days. And then in wrapping up here, Zaluzhny talks about what surprised him with the Russian military. He says, quote, "That was one of my major mistakes, that I believed that the number of casualties inflicted on the enemy even a year ago could stop the war. That the number of casualties would stop any country, but not Russia. On the line of contact are mountains of enemy bodies. No one is trying to take them away. Such is the attitude of the Russian Federation to its people. Today it is difficult to predict how much more losses need to be inflicted for this to stop. I believe that it is necessary to do this continuously until the war ends and the enemy refuses to conduct hostilities in our country." I want to bring this up because throughout this war, you've seen people point to Western analysts and say, you don't understand. Russia's willing to sacrifice. Russia is willing to go through a lot more casualties, men and equipment, than we would ever dream in the United States. And it's fair. It's hard to get in the Russian mindset. I thought it was notable that even Zaluzhny, the senior Ukrainian military officer, is saying, I didn't see that coming. I thought that they would give up after this volume of casualties. That's got to be daunting, right? Knowing just how many enemy soldiers you've killed, thinking that you crossed that line long ago and you're still not there. It's an uphill battle for Ukraine in a lot of ways, and this is one of them, having to kill a lot more Russians than they ever anticipated. But that's all I've got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. Substack now also has ad-free, sponsor-free videos that go live about 1 hour before they're up on YouTube. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.